All right. Today we're going to be talking about business formation. How do we legally form different types of businesses? For what purpose? The different structures, how they're structured, disadvantages and advantages of each structure, and maybe looking at pros and cons of entrepreneurship altogether, and some of the characteristics it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Who here has actually formed a business before? Started an organization? Who here has parents who own their own business? You have parents or family members?
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of business they have? Like, if it's an LLC?
My uncle, he has a trucking company.
Trucking company?
Yeah, and then my dad, he has a barber shop, so I don't know if that counts.
Okay. Who here has sold anything online? What have you sold?
I don't know. Stuff on eBay when I was younger.
Just eBay, right? Did you ever think about making a business out of it, or
No.
just random things that you had to get rid of?
Just trying to think.
All right. Hey, it is a great thing to start a business. One, you think of tax advantages for different types of business structures. Two, you think of separating yourself from certain activities, right? All sorts of things. So we'll discuss those as we move along. All right, so what are we going to learn? Four basic forms of business ownership. I may throw in a couple extras or expound on a few. Advantages, disadvantages of sole proprietorship. We'll learn what that is. Evaluate the pros and cons of partnership as a form of business ownership. Why corporations have become the dominant form of business ownership. And limited liability companies, or LLCs, becoming increasingly popular. And advantages and disadvantages of franchising. All right, the big four. First, we have sole proprietorship. Right, so let's say like, hey, you want to go start a business on TikTok Shop. You want to have your own TikTok shop. You want to sell certain items on TikTok Shop, right? You're like, yeah, I'm just going to start doing that. I'm going to start it today. I'm going to start selling things. Then the question would be like, well, is this an actual business? You're like, yeah, it's a business. I'm like, well, what kind? You're like, well, I haven't done any legal paperwork at all, but I'm just selling stuff. Right? I'm selling stuff. I'm operating as a business. Right? That would be a sole proprietorship. Say single owner who usually actively manages the company. It's just probably you. You're doing the stuff. We'd say, hey, the money that you make on TikTok Shop is treated as personal income. You have to file as an individual on your taxes. It counts as your income, personally. You're like, well, okay, that means the federal government will tax me at a certain rate personally for my earned income because of this. The debts are owner's personal responsibility. Let's say you bought a ton of inventory, you have a bunch of extra stuff to operate this TikTok shop, and now you're like, well, you know what? I owe a lot of people. You're like, well, who owes a lot of people? Like, I do personally. Maybe you can't pay them back, what happened? I don't know. Maybe they'll take some of your assets, right? They do a default on some things, maybe loans, personal loans or something like that. And you'll be responsible. You could lose all your personal stuff. Like, as a sole proprietor, you could lose your house. Like, is the house in your name personally? Like, yeah, it is. Or your condo, or your cars, or anything. You decide to operate as a business without legal protection. Personal legal protection. All right, unlimited liability. When businesses form as sole proprietorships or business partnerships, cannot pay their bills, all or part of the business owner's financial assets, cash, bank accounts, investments, and homes can be seized to pay the business debts. Right, that's not good. when someone sues me, I don't want them to sue me personally and take all my stuff, right? That might not be such a good way of going about business, but it may have a reason to. You might go, it's small, it's just me selling TikTok shops, not that big of a deal. There's no need to incorporate legally with this business. All right, next we got partnerships. Voluntary agreement under which two or more people act as co-owners of a business or profit. We got general partnership in which all partners can take an active role in managing the business and have unlimited liability for any claims against the firm. So you're like, hey, you know what? I want to start a business with someone that I know. Maybe depending on the amount of money they put up, we'll say the amount of responsibility that each one takes in the business. Could be 50-50 split, could be 65-35, could be anything that you agree upon. But that also means that you also agree upon the amount of liability, risk, at the same amount. So if it's 50-50 split, you're like, well, you know what, we have 50-50 responsibility. If someone sues us, they can take half of mine, they can take half of yours, right? But like, it could be advantage to that, because somebody may be a really good manager or owner, or just have a ton of money to start the company, right? So people oftentimes form partnerships. There's more, and we'll discuss later, like limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships. We'll get into that a little bit more. All right, what is a corporation, right? Corporation is a legal entity that is separate and distinct from its owners. So conceptually, corporations is another individual with its own social security number, really, right? And its own responsibilities and its own everything, separate from individuals who started the business, right? So you're like, hey, if you want to form a corporation, this corporation has its own identity. It'll have a tax ID number, which is essentially a social security number for businesses, or employer identification numbers. It has its own risk, so if you sue in that business, even if you're part of the business, it has nothing to do with you. No one's coming to get your personal money. Like, well, that's kind of cool that you can separate all of these things from the owners. Now, usually each state has business services through the Secretary of State. So just like you would go get your driver's license at the Secretary of State, usually they handle incorporated articles or business services. Right? You need to report every year. If you're starting an organization from scratch, first thing you need is an articles of incorporation. This document is filed with usually the Secretary of State to establish the existence of a new corporation. First thing you'll probably put is who are the owners. Could be one, could be multiple. You might put some other people who have contact information for the government to contact you. Sometimes it may ask for other information as well too. Now beyond that, you're like, okay, that's a pretty cool document. The government, the state has recognized that I'm a business now, legally. But you can't just stop there, because you have to go to the IRS website, put in information, and get a tax ID number, right? Which I said is essentially like a social security number. With that information, you're like, okay, now I have these documents, I could go down to the bank and open up a business account, a business checking account, a business savings account, right? If you have pretty good credit personally, you probably can open up a business credit card. So you're like, oh, interesting. Now most of the business activities, before when it was sole proprietorship, you're using your own credit card, right? You're using your own debit card, you're using your own personal stuff being taken out of your account to operate TikTok shop or whatever, right? You say, here, you know what, I'm separating stuff. I'm putting money in the business account so I can use it specifically for business purposes, right? You're like, well, that's kind of cool, because if the government taxes you personally on earned income, what if you start putting your income mostly to the business? So at the end of the year, it looks like you didn't make any money at all, which means little to no taxes. Personally, right? And so think about this, you're like, well, let's say it's just you operating this LLC, this corporation. You're like, hey, I'm going out to lunch, but I'm meeting somebody for lunch. Like, oh, this is not a personal expense, this is a business expense. I can swipe with my business credit card, not my personal credit card, right? You're like, that's good. So I could write off these expenses at the end of the year as business expenses instead of personal expenses. Could be anything. Let's say you bought suits. You're like, I need suits for the job. I'm a salesperson. That would be a business expense too. You need to fly overseas to meet a potential investor. The flight cost, the hotel, the gas, everything will be counted as a business expense. So you're like, that's kind of cool. It takes away that liability off of you personally. If not, you'll be paying taxes on that personally at the end of the year. All right, and then limited liability. Owners are not personally liable for claims against their firm. Owners with limited liability may lose their investment in the company, but their other personal assets are protected. Basically what I just said, like, hey, personally, they can't take your house, your car, even if you owe millions and millions and billions of dollars with this corporation, you owe $1 billion. They can't come take your personal house, your car, none, credit cards, none. Your personal credit won't suffer, though. Right? You're like, well, that's great, right? Because it separates the liability. But you can't lose everything in a business, right? So the business, you can lose all your investments, you gotta sell off the inventory, the buildings, they can liquidate everything with the business. And now LLC, everyone here has heard of an LLC before? Anyone here never heard of an LLC? Raise your hand. Never heard of an LLC? All right, so remember you said, who's it, your uncle has a business? Most likely your uncle has an LLC, right? We say it's kind of the simplest form of ownership in the business structure. That's not a sole proprietorship. Because let's say if your uncle gets sued operating a business and he don't have an LLC, he never incorporated, they can take all his personal stuff, truck, everything, his house. If he has an LLC, they can't touch him. Separate the business from personal, right? So you say LLC is kind of the easiest form to start, right? Business ownership that offers both limited liability to its owners and flexible tax treatment. Which means that if you want to, you can count some of the stuff as personal income. If you don't, like I said, you can move all your personal income to business income. There's a lot of flexibility there. Relatively new in some sense, right? More common over the last, like say, 20 years. You can elect to have your business's taxed as either a corporation or a partnership. Right, so you could go and have limited liability partnerships. It's actually called an LLP or limited partnership. They're kind of different, right? Where individuals are both taking on certain percentage of risk and certain percentage of responsibilities, or maybe like just a 50-50 split altogether. Now what they have too in some states is called a series LLC, right? Which means that, hey, it might cost you, let's say $750, $800 to start an LLC in Illinois, right? To get the articles of incorporation, to get everything else you need to have a legal business, a legal LLC. You're like, well, it's kind of pricey. I haven't even started doing anything with the business. I'm still paying close to $1,000. But they may allow you to start like additional companies for cheap, maybe like $50. So you could do in certain states, recognize series LLC. So if you're like, hey, you know what? I want to start cafes with my main company, but I also got some other ideas. I want to start a shoe company. I want to start a bar. You can start those companies separately. Separate companies for say extra $50. Like, it's pretty cool. So you can start unlimited on the companies, right? Now, most big corporations incorporate, right, through the state of Delaware. which means that even if they're not there, they don't operate a business there, they don't live there, most corporations incorporate Delaware, big ones, right? We're thinking of Googles and credit card companies, things like that. Delaware happens to be the first state. Usually whatever's the first, usually is sometimes the best, right? So it's probably the best for businesses in terms of them protecting your information from the government. And they give a lot of flexibility for these businesses, as well as starting like series. The series does talk about it. So, for example, if you could go on like the Secretary of State's website for Delaware, type in Trump, and what you will see is Trump has about 500 companies. Don't mean that they all make money. Some of them may not make $0, right? But you can say, hey, you know what? That's kind of cool. Why? Because it's how cheap it is to start additional companies. They could just be kind of shell companies, as we call them, right? Like they just kind of exist. They don't really have any activities to some degree, right? Which is good. Sometimes it's bad because you're like, oh, okay, can drug organizations start shell companies? Sure, they can. They do, right? Let's start a legitimate business and use drug money for it, right? So that's kind of how that operates with the Series LLC. All right, total number of businesses by form of ownership. So we say sole proprietorships are the most. 27 million sole proprietorships in the U.S., or 72%. Next we got corporations, 6.3 million or 17%, and partnerships, 4 million or 11%, right? So sole proprietorships and corporations are the most prevalent in the country. Now, who here wants to be an entrepreneur? Who wants to start their own business at some point in their life? Who knows what kind of business they want to start? Nobody has an idea? Okay, so let me ask you, what is your reason behind wanting to start your own company at some point in your life? In the back, what do you think?
My reason?
Yeah, like this idea of like, man, I wanna start my own business. Like, what's your motivation for that?
I just want like a small company, like nothing crazy, but like something for like on the side, like that's like manageable.
All right, so do you want it to be your main income source, or do you just want it to be something on the side and you work a regular 9 to 5?
Something on the side.
Something on the side. And the reason for that is what? Just to have something extra?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how about you in the back?
I wanna be my own boss.
What's the reason behind wanting to be your own boss?
I don't wanna work a 9 to 5. Don't wanna do all that.
So when you think of 9 to 5, in your mind, like what are you thinking? Like, oh man, the boss is making way more money, I'm getting pennies, I don't want nobody controlling my schedule, my life. Like what are you thinking when you think about 9 to 5?
I just feel like I don't want to sit in the office and just like do paperwork and like stuff like that. I don't know. I want to be the boss. Like I want to be the one. Like oh yeah, like I
Control.
own this company. Like I own something. Just have like people probably work for me.
Gotcha. Right, so you want control.
Yeah.
Basically over your own life. Who else? Put their hand up. Who else wants to be an entrepreneur? Why? What's your motivation?
The money. And
Money.
free will to make my own decisions.
All right, you like money, right? I mean, it does, the old kind of saying is what? You'll never get rich working for someone else, right? That's the old saying, right? Which means that if you ever in your mind think of wanting to be wealthy, right, and retiring at 30, you probably can't do that working for somebody else. Right? So you're kind of choosing your path. You're like, do I want to work for somebody for 30, 40 years and then be old and retire? Or do I want to start something that's risky, but potentially it could be multi-million, billion-dollar company, I can give it to my children, I can have all the free time in the world, I can let somebody else manage it, I can just live it up, right? So it has its reasoning, but here's our first discussion activity. Consider 6 traits typically attributed to entrepreneurs, right? So think of people you know with a business. Autonomy, remember autonomy is like being independent. Sacrifice, right? The risk versus reward. High energy, the need to achieve, people who just love to win. Self-confidence and locus of control. The locus of control, the word locus means really location of control, right? Latin, loci, locus, in plural. Be like, hey, some people believe that they control their own destiny, personally, with their decisions, and some people believe that the external world controls their destiny, right? Kind of think with those 2 different perspectives. So, with your groups, ask yourselves the question, which 2 are least like those of managers in large companies? So when you think of large companies, CEOs, chief marketing, chief operating officers, et cetera, what do you think are the 2 most characteristics of those individuals? And which 2 are least like those of managers in large companies? And give me your reasons why those 2. All right, I give you a couple minutes to talk within your groups. I hear Bad Bunny is gonna be performing for Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, I seen that.
All right, what are we thinking? Here, what were you thinking? Why those 2?
then you might want to have the need to do it like faster, like something like that.
All right, so you think those are top 2? So need to achieve and sacrifice. Cause you're like, hey, you know what? I don't know, if you got a family, And like, oh, did you go be this entrepreneur or manager? Lot of risk. Or do you just go get a job? Right? Less risk with a job. You know, you're gonna get paid every 2 weeks or whatever. Right? You know, your schedule. You're like, if you take on this entrepreneur management thing, bless you. You're kind of like, I don't know, you might always work. People call you all the time, right? Middle of the night. That's a big sacrifice, right? And with need to achieve, right? You're like, I don't know. You may have, like you're saying, people kind of forcing you to complete tasks and goals. That comes with a lot of responsibility. What are the two least things? Just one. All right, so one of the things we say, autonomy may be least because you may have to work with other people. You have to communicate and delegate tasks to other people. So you're not really that always independent, autonomous. All right, in the back.
For which traits do you think are the most? I speak for myself because I am a manager. So, I would say sacrifice because like having to go to school, like a full-time student and a full-time worker, I do have to give up a lot of like my social life because I'm always like at work. So, that takes a lot of the pull on me because I am tired of most of the time, but I still have to go to work regardless.
Yeah.
And I would say self-confidence as well because when I am left in charge, so I kind of like if customers look at me like, oh, like she doesn't even care, like she looks tired or whatever, they're not gonna want to be there because they're gonna be like, she's left in charge. So I feel like you have to have a lot of self-confidence to be able to like talk to customers, get them to buy in the store.
Yeah, they have to believe that you know what you're doing, basically, right? All right, could you think of two of the least?
I
Or
would
at least one?
probably like locus of control in a way. Wait, what does that mean again?
Well, remember, it would say people who are like control freaks. So people who think that their decision making, they control their destiny, versus people who are not really think like that. They think like, oh no, there's external forces that control.
Yeah, I feel like that one because like I don't like obviously I tell the employees like what they have to do, but it doesn't come directly from me. Like it comes from like that like three people on top of me, you know?
Yeah.
So I kinda just have to follow what they want and then just like tell them like, oh.
I
this is
got you.
what
So you're like, hey, it's not all on me.
Mhm.
There's some other factors that play into this. How about right here?
I said, I agree with them when it's sacrifice and need to achieve, because you have to be able to let go of things in your life that might not dedicate you to fully be able to pursue your business. And you need that sense of need to achieve, because if you don't, then you're not gonna want, I mean, you're not gonna set any goals or ambitions for your business, and you have to have those parameters to be successful.
Gotcha. So you're like, hey, entrepreneurship and management is about goals and objectives, and those who have the need to achieve usually orient themselves towards that. Right? All right, then could you think of at least one thing least?
I would say both focus and control and high energy.
Like high energy.
I don't think you need to be a high energy person to like have be an entrepreneur. It's just your discipline more of because some high energy individuals can't focus, and some low energy individuals can focus way harder and put in a lot more work. It's all about your discipline and you need to achieve. I'd say.
Yeah. Like, hey, you know, you can be extremely disciplined and stoic about the way that you think and hand out tasks and execute. You don't have to be amped up all the time to be a good manager or entrepreneur. Next. Did you have something individually?
I was thinking self-confidence and need to achieve. I don't really know how to explain this one.
Why the self-confidence aspect? What's so important about that?
Because you have to be able to step outside your comfort zone and get things done, what you normally do.
you're like, hey, being a manager, entrepreneur is not for everybody. Everybody's not a manager and everybody's not a business owner. Most people are workers. So you gotta be different. And be different means that there's something about your self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence that's different than other people. All right, could you think of at least one thing that's least?
Probably the control part.
Okay. All right, and in the back.
For me, probably self-confidence and sacrifice.
Okay, for the same reasons, basically. And could you think of at least one of the least?
I guess high energy.
Which one?
High energy.
Oh, kind of for the same reasons, you don't need to be amped up. Okay. Anything that you think?
I think the top two would be sacrifice and need to achieve.
Mhm.
And
And for least?
the locus of control.
Well, all right, excellent. So we kind of agreed on most of those. All right, remember we say, hey, people at the top of these businesses usually exhibit characteristics or traits of sociopathy. So your CEOs are kind of sociopaths, to a degree, right? Maybe not clinically speaking. They probably exhibit a lot of traits of sociopathy. You're like, well, you kind of need to be there. If you have to make critical decisions and you're too emotional, you're too concerned with what other people think, you're probably not good for that position. It's not for everybody, right? You have to make some hard decisions that may impact a lot of people's lives, and probably not in a positive way. Right? So like you do need some characteristics to be at the top. Or eventually, you know, they kind of say you become that as you move towards the top. That environment changes you. Sometimes they say, you know, basically like corruption environments basically lead to be corruptible, right? You are essentially a product of your environment, right? Which means you move to stop people stop caring more and not care so much. You kind of maybe exhibit some of those traits as well too. Something to think about. Not always the case, right? You can still be a modest, empathetic individual as a leader, but very rare. One other organization structure I forgot to mention was not-for-profit. Remember we said not-for-profit, what distinguishes it from these other ones is that you can't have shareholders, you can't have stock, right? You're like, well, what's the benefit of that? Generally, not-for-profits are something for good general welfare or social good. You're like, hey, I'm going to create an organization to help children, a museum, a school, a church, a library, right? Some kind of organization to help society. Right, well, what's the benefits in doing that? Well, they give you tax exemption, so you won't have to pay taxes on a lot of things. And we say the university is what kind of business? Not-for-profit. If it was for-profit, it will have to shut down probably by the end of the month. Why? It says, hey, we're for-profit now. It's too expensive. Chairs, tables, people cutting grass, people building stuff, right? Professors, administrators, too expensive to run. As a for-profit, which means they have to pay taxes on this building and everything else they buy. Those taxes will be way outweigh the benefits of your tuition. It wouldn't work anymore, right? So maybe the for-profits, you're like, oh, those are online schools where they don't have a big giant campus to pay all this money for, right? So yes, so you're like, hey, this is a social good though, right? It's good that we have not-for-profit organizations. Most churches are not-for-profit. Most museums, most libraries, most schools, right? Not-for-profit organizations. All right, here's our next question. hey, and which of the entrepreneurial skills do you feel you are strongest? Even for those of you who don't want to be entrepreneurs, out of all those skill sets we talked about, which one do you feel that you are the strongest with? We don't have to talk about this within our groups, we can just answer this here. Which ones do you think you're strongest with? Do I have any highly competitive need to always win people in the class? Have to win, right? That would be your main motivating force, right? If you're an entrepreneur. It's a game, you like, it's a game and I have to beat this game, right? And every challenge that comes up to you as an entrepreneur, you're like, I have to beat it. Figure out the challenge. Who else? Anyone here has extreme self-confidence, great self-confidence. So you believe in yourself, right? You're like, yeah, I believe I could do it. But if people are telling you like you can't, oh, you know, it'll fail. That's a bad idea. That's a dumb idea. You won't get the money for that. And you kind of thinking like, I don't care what you say. Right? I'll make it happen some way, somehow. A really great quality. Anyone here is just really a control freak? In what way?
For example, right now I have like an essay and because it was due this Thursday, I started working it out with the account.
To do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're like, hey, you know, some people are like, really feel the need to be in control. Good and bad about that, right? But sometimes we don't want to give up control. You know, like sometimes with a business, you have to dish out responsibilities. People may be better than you at certain things. People may be smarter than you in certain areas, right? And you have to like kind of give up your ego almost to a sense. And be like, no, you do it, you take care of it, right? Difficult. Or we say, hey, sometimes control freaks suffer from a lot of anxiety, right? If things don't work out the way that they thought it would work out, the world is over, all right? I think, you know, I could be a control freak too. Like, I have no problem. I collect motorcycles, I ride motorcycles, skydiving, you know, all sorts of crazy things. I don't have a problem doing it if I'm doing it myself, but I still feel uneasy in the plane with the pilot. Like, that's not me flying the plane. I'll fly it. I'll feel comfortable. But I'm like, my life is kind of left to whoever's up there at the front. And I still feel uneasy about that, right? But I'm like, maybe riding a motorcycle without a helmet on the expressway, like I do it all the time, right? Anyone else? What about for high energy people? Who are my high energy people? You're high energy?
A little bit.
Is it like circumstantial? Like
Yeah.
it depends on what's going on?
Yeah.
You're stimulated by something. You kind of same, are you always high energy or you're like, it's situational?
He's usually always on.
Oh, it's,
No.
Yes.
Alright, but is it a bit of extroversion? Like, hey, you know, you get amped up when you're around people and then you kind of lose energy when you're kind of by yourself, or what is it?
More ADHD, I think.
Okay. Right, I kind of think I probably suffer from a little bit of that too, which I think kind of helped, right? Kind of helped me want to learn about a lot of things, right? My attention is so bad to focus on just one thing. All right. Oh, do we have any presentations today? Who completed one of their business observations today? Don't be shy. Anyone over here? No? Yeah? Okay. Maybe Thursday. Remember I said last week, if you can have a product to come up here and show us and talk about the business, right? When was the business started, what is it about, et cetera, et cetera. It could be anything, it could have been a great array bottle, right? It could have been your, what do you call those? Yeah. Right, anything, it could be your shoes you're wearing, your shirt, or something of the sort. So how about Thursday, we'll all have something to share as a group. Sounds good? Thursday. All right, some advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorship. Like, hey, why start a sole proprietorship? Like, well, I'm not gonna be doing that big of a business. It's easy to form, I can retain control. I got pride in ownership, hey, I got a business going on. I can retain all of the money myself, I don't have to dish it out to other people. Sometimes a tax advantage, right, potentially. Disadvantages, remember we say you're still liable for everything. You're doing all the work, so heavy workload and responsibility, and lack of permanence, right? Remember, you need to get other people and entities involved if you plan on sticking around a long time as a business. All right, here's a question. Do you know any sole proprietors and how large is their business? Do you know anybody who's just like selling stuff online, right? But they really haven't like formed like a legal corporation, but they're making decent amount of money or little money. Anyone, if you know anyone that's operating an online shop or something? Yes.
So in high school, my assistant coach ran a like vintage clothing store online.
How did it do?
He was selling pretty good stuff. I mean, it wasn't like his main source of income, but it was bringing in good money for how much he was putting into it.
Do you know if they continued on or they?
He still does it.
Okay. All right, excellent. Now, can you think of reasons to start with an LLC rather than a sole proprietorship? Like starting. Be like, hey, I'm gonna start, before I start doing business activities, I'm gonna legally start my LLC instead of just start doing business activities as a sole proprietor. Did you think of some reasons? Can you think of any reasons? Right, maybe you have a lot of money. You're like, whoa, I have a lot of money personally. Let's say you have millions of dollars to begin with. You're like, I'm gonna start selling some stuff without incorporating, starting an LLC. A week later, somebody sues you. And you're like, wow, now they're gonna come take all your actual tens of millions of dollars. You're gonna be sued personally. If you had started an LLC, like who are they suing? They're suing the business, not you. Right? So we say that's really the huge advantage of limited liability, right? Hence the LLC. You want to separate yourself from lawsuits primarily, not being held responsible as an individual. The business holds responsibility, especially if it's a big time thing. Let's say it's financial investments, it's real estate, something major. You probably don't want to start doing that without having proper legal liability, right? You'd be sued very, very quickly. Can you think of any other reasons? All right, and then lastly, we'll talk about partnerships, right? Can two heads and bankrolls be better than one? Formation of general partnerships. No limit on the number of partners. As a matter of fact, let me just make sure they cover C corps and S corps. Oh yeah, we do. Okay, we'll talk about that on Thursday. All right, general partnerships. You're like, hey, partnerships is good because maybe you want to start a business, but you don't want all the risk. You're like, I like the idea. Let's get a bunch of people in on it. We put all our money together, but in case things don't work out, I don't want to be held 100% with my investment, right? I only want them to take a little piece that I'm responsible for, right? I don't wanna have to pay for your liabilities as well too. So you're like, hey, you know what, they can work out pretty good. You can have no limit on the number of partners you want with a general partnership. Partnership agreement should entail details regarding initial financial contributions. Who put up how much money at the beginning, right? That needs to be in an agreement, right? So by law, the government or whoever can say we know exactly who's put in X amount of dollars. Specific duties and responsibility. Who's the treasurer? Who's the secretary? Who's the CEO? Who's the manager? Who controls what? So if things do fail, we know essentially who to blame for different areas. Right? Because think about it. You may sue your partner. You'd be like, hey, you know what? You failed to actually do your duties and responsibilities that you agreed upon in contract. I'm gonna sue you because you made me lose all my money because of your poor performance as a partner. You didn't live up to your duties and responsibilities. All right, sharing profits and losses, right? So you wanna know the percentage amount of ownership so you know how much of the profits you'll get and how much would you lose in case there are losses. Settling disagreements. And then last one, death or withdrawal of a partner, right? It should be some kind of caveat, right? Some kind of like, if this happened, then this happens, right? If you should die at any point in time, this is what happens with your ownership. Someone can say, hey, transfer to wife, husband, children, dog, something of the sort. Right? However they want to draft it. Or you say, hey, the potential to leave at a certain amount of time. So when I was doing real estate investment, right? And so I would get about 5 people who had a lot of money, wealthy individuals, to go in on a property, right? And I wasn't putting up any money of my own, but I was managing this stuff, right? Managing the assets. In the contracts, a lot of times, I will put maybe after 5 years, that person can have the option to take their money back, right, at any point in time. You will want that because you gotta make people feel comfortable with putting up money, especially if you're not putting up that much money of your own, right? So you do wanna have maybe stipulations to say, after X amount of years, you can withdraw your ownership, right? You're no longer a partner, right? All right, partnerships are good. Real good. Think of this concept. You don't have to struggle in life. If you have a large family and everybody works, you essentially could be millionaires very, very quickly. But you're like, it's unfortunate that people are individualistic. So they don't want to help out on these ideas like starting a business. But think, if you had 10 family members, you're like, hey, we all work. Let's go buy a building, right? That's gonna make it a lot easier for us to come up with the money to do so, right? Or if somebody got good credit, you're like, hey, let's use this person's credit to get the loan or something of the sort. You're like, that works well. And now everybody could reap the rewards of that. But as a single individual, imagine trying to come up with all this different money and take on all the responsibilities. Take a long time, maybe sometimes nearly impossible. So the ability to pool financial resources is the major, major advantage. You may not have the money that somebody else does, but you have the skill set to be a good manager, leader, and that can work out that way. So a partnership usually has that advantage. Ease of formation. It says relatively easily. It takes just a little bit of paperwork and possible tax advantages. Disadvantage, right? Unlimited liability, you're still liable. Potential for disagreements, you're into a partnership and now, like, hey, your personal relationship suffered, you hate that person, but you still gotta do business with them because it's your partner. And have conflict of interest, right? That could be a disadvantage. Lack of continuity, remember we say everybody gotta be on the same page usually all the time with things, and that might not be the case, right? And then difficulty in withdrawing from a partnership. Let's say you don't have an agreement on when you wanna get out of this relationship. But now you're ready to, right? You're gonna have some difficult legal challenges, for that, right? And you still may be held responsible for debts that the business has. Alright, so we say, hey, there's LLPs and there's LPs. Limited partnership, LP. Partnership that includes at least one general partner who actively manages the company and accepts unlimited liability, and one limited partner who gives up the right to actively manage the company in exchange for limited liability. Why would someone do this? Like, in what situation would you do a limited partnership? Where one person manages and takes on all the liability, and another person doesn't really manage and just wants a little liability. What situation could that happen? Yes.
Someone wants like a partner that they trust with them, but they still want the company to be under their name and have all the liability of it, so they can still make their final decisions on things.
Yeah, sometimes you want a silent partner, right? Like party, you don't really see that person, they don't really have any activities with the business, but guess what? They're like, yo, I put up $1 million in cash. Right? They're like, I put up the money, you manage. I put up the money, you manage. Right? That could be the situation. Limited, LLP, limited liability partnership. All partners have the right to participate in the management and have limited liability for company debts. So it means that you have equal amounts of management activities and equal amount of liability for all the debts, right? Sounds good. You may want to be actively engaged in what happens day to day, especially if you get some money in it. Like, I wanna have a say-so. But you also gonna have to take on the same amount of liability for debts, right? If you need that arrangement. We don't have to do that. Alright, what time is it?
3:25.
Okay. This will be our last, section today. Alright, and then corporations, right? An artificial person. We say corporations essentially, yeah, so it's a person, right? We say tax ID or employment identification number, essentially a social security number. Right, the corporation itself is really just another person out there that the government recognizes. But there's different types, even beyond LLC and partnerships. There are C corps and S corps, right? C corps are what major corporations like Apple are. Apple, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, things with those types of companies. Those are the major C corporations. So this is the most common type. It offers limited liability to all of its owners who are stockholders. Right? So it basically says each stockholder has some liability to a degree. Right? Which means that each stockholder can just lose their money. So if you own money and get stocks in Apple, Apple does something bad, the stock will go down and you can lose money. Then we have corporate bylaws, the basic rules governing how a corporation is organized and how it conducts its business. Requirements vary by state. So if you decide to be a C corporation, you have to draft up rules about how you're gonna do business and all the other things you have to think about along the way. The government wants to see that, right? Because usually there's gonna be a lot of people involved in this business, and that's a lot of responsibility. Now remember, with an LLC, what you can do also is create stock. So even if you had a lemonade stand, let's say you had a lemonade stand on the corner, and you make $400 a week with your lemonade stand, you can create private stock. you could create 1,000,000 stocks. You can say how much you're gonna sell each stock for. You can offer to sell for $10. So then you can go and ask individuals, like, hey, you wanna buy a piece of ownership in my company? Like, how much? Well, I got 1,000 stocks available and they're going for $10 each, right? And like, what do you use that money for? To buy more lemonade stands, and more lemonade, and sugar, and cups, et cetera, right? So think of that concept. You can go out today and incorporate, probably take a few days or a week, and you could start something as simple as anything, and you could say, I'm offering X amount of stocks to anybody who wants to buy into my corporation, right? And you could raise money that way. That's how you raise money, right? Basically selling off ownership of the business. You can raise a lot of money like that, right? We see that on Shark Tank, right? Who watches Shark Tank? Right, using like, oh, you know, what are they offering? They're like, I'll give you this for 30%. Give me $30,000 for 30% ownership, right? That's essentially what a person does. A lot of those companies are maybe LLC, right? They're LLCs. All right, so C corporations have stockholders, right? And they have bylaws. But we say, hey, you know, ownership is represented by stock, which means that stockholders have a say-so now. People you never met. So we look up at the index, the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow Jones Industrials. We look up those corporations. We're like, oh wow, they're selling stock. The people who own the stock have a say-so. They're owners, right? So if you own shares of Apple, you're an owner of Apple, right? Anybody here owns any stock? So your hand go up and then it's
Well,
touch.
I do, but like, I don't manage it, so.
Okay. But I mean, you could literally just go on any Fidelity website, anything. You can even go on Chase Bank, Bank of America, blah, blah, blah. And you can buy stock. You buy, I'm gonna buy some Apple, right? I'm gonna buy T-Mobile stock or something, right? You can buy it at any point in time. Now you're an owner. You're like, no, I'm interested in T-Mobile and Apple. Let me see what their stock looks like from the past 6 months. Right now you're an investor and you start to kind of participate in looking at all the investment activities. You might start reading the news more, looking at the economy, how it's impacting your investment, right? So this is important to people, probably your parents, right? You're concerned about all of this stuff because they probably own some stocks or bonds or something of the sort, right? But we'll talk about bonds later, but for now we're just talking about stock. Stock is ownership in a company. Stock for large corporations usually publicly traded. Remember I said you have an LLC, you could be private. You're not on the New York Stock Exchange. You can just make up any amount of stocks. You made it up. But it's not listed anywhere on any exchange at all. But big ones is listed publicly, which means they have to do all this legal things, register with the Security Exchange Commissions, et cetera, et cetera. I know, say small businesses can have this view as one shareholder, right? So if there's one person that owns it, it could just be one share. You're on 100% of it. And then we get institutional investors, organization that pools contribution from investors, clients, depositors, and usage funds to buy stocks and other securities. Think of this notion. The city of Chicago is a corporation. It takes taxes from people who live in Chicago, right? Sales tax, all sorts. You're like, what does it do with that money? Where's that money at? Like, well, it's held in an account, just like you and I would have an account. And then they use that money to not only put up, fix the roads, put up new street lights, but they invest the money. So they say, we're gonna buy stock, right? So the city and the state and everybody else who's a corporation buys stocks and bonds and everything else. Just like you and I do, right? Because they say we have the money, but we want to increase the money, make more money from this money that we have. So we say institutional investors, so it could be other corporations, right? Where they put money together. It could be pension funds. Like, oh, you're a police officer, you get a pension, and that pension is part of a pension fund from all police officers. And that fund buys stocks, right? Because it wants to increase the value of its money. Teachers' retirement funds, right? Teachers' pensions. So everybody's kind of trading and investing to that degree. All right, now once you get these large corporations, you have a board of directors, elected by stockholders. Remember we say now the people kind of own the company. All the investors own this company, so they have a say-so. Now they get to elect the stockholders. They get to elect the board of directors, sorry. And they get to establish the corporation's mission and set its broad objectives. The board of directors do this. And board of directors appoint people. So a CEO is not just given that job. There's a group of individuals on the board say, we elect you to have this job. Any point you don't do something we don't think is good for the stock owners, we fire you, you're out. We do it all the time, right? You're out, we're bringing somebody else in. You don't have the best interests of our stockholders. You have poor performance. Right, so that's kind of how that works with that. All right, any questions about this stuff? Not difficult to start a company. Just a little bit of paperwork, a few $100s, and guess what? You take this information, go down to Chase Bank and say, hey, I want to open up a business account. Give me a business debit card. And now you can start using that just like you would personally. If it's business related stuff, right? Gas, food, clothes. But for right now, you're like, oh, I'm using my own business debit card. It's me personally. May not be the best way to go about it, right? So eventually you have to think, is your life and everything you do in it a business? Or is everything you do in life personal? If it's personal, it's probably you're at a disadvantage than others. Because think, there's a lot of business people, they don't pay any of their money, ever. They never pay. Yes?
Do you pay with your business card, your personal card for things like things like gas and all that?
If it's business related, I do. Yeah, absolutely, right? Try to be ethical. You wanna lower your expenses and tax burden from year to year. So yeah, if it's things business related, travel, dinners, things of that nature, business credit card. And then, people that work for me, I give them charge cards. So you're like, hey, anything related to business, you go out and you buy it for the business. Right? Sometimes I think about this, if you go work for a company, you could get a stipend. But they'll give you a card and say, hey, you get to eat $200 worth of food every day because you're on a business trip, right? You get to stay at such and such hotel and you're not paying for it, right? So like this is good stuff to make people part of your organization and want to stay, but also to separate the expenses away from you as a personal individual. So think about this. You think about what you're doing. Even for my athletes. Who are my athletes? Raise your hand. You're like, well, are you banking on making a professional league, which 0.01% of people will make? Or are you going to transfer your skills and knowledge as an athlete to say, maybe start a coaching organization, consulting, marketing organization, sports management, et cetera, right? And you're like, hey, with my knowledge and love of sports, I could be making millions by training people or giving them some sort of knowledge, right? So it's always an option as well too. So it's good to try to transfer things that you're really good at and know because it makes it just a lot easier, right? You're an expert in sports, basically, right? Who are my people that want to start a restaurant? Anyone? No restaurants? All right, everyone, that's it for today. Remember Thursday, bring in a product to share and share